Much easier just to have
Yeah, I
this
can
to
put that
use.
in there. I can also put it, as I said, I can put it in a reference folder.
Mhm.
That way we don't have to always remember, oh, when's the last time we used that? Oh, December 18th meeting. We don't want to have to go bouncing into that every time.
Now, the other question I had, and I don't know who to talk to,
Yep.
can I get my Board of Health on here also?
Yes.
Because that would be so helpful, and I have one.
It just has to be linked to basically whoever creates the account.
Thanks. We're still waiting for a quorum, though. Thanks.
No, you have a quorum.
We do?
You have three.
Oh, we do have three. We have five.
She's letting us know that we're recording now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There's
We
the
do.
removal bylaw is here.
What?
There's no lights on.
Bylaw is on. See it?
The earth removal bylaws on here? Oh,
It's in the document.
Okay. Well, I don't remember uploading it, so okay.
No, it is part of the original bylaw, the zoning bylaw.
Oh, no, but we have the earth removal regulations. We have a separate document.
Regulations.
That's what I meant. I apologize.
Okay.
If I said bylaw, I meant regulations.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm sorry, Bill, what was your question?
I forgot, what was it I asked? Oh, about the
Oh, yeah, Board of Health, yes. As long as the person who sets up the shared drive links it to the same email address, you're fine.
Okay, now who do I see to do that?
I'll talk to Mallory about it.
Oh, okay. Awesome, thank you.
So we are being recorded if we want to call to order.
I'll make a motion, we open
Yes.
the meeting at 6:30.
That's what she was coming in to point to us. I told her that from now on we need that because the last two meetings, we've had pieces of them missing. So I asked her to point to us. when-
Okay, so she's ready.
Yes.
So I can call the meeting to order, I guess, and declare a quorum present. Did you hear from either of these guys?
John or Craig? No, nobody got in touch with me that they weren't coming. Aside from Josh said that he wasn't feeling well and he wouldn't be
Yeah, I
there.
know Josh wasn't coming. Okay, well, we'll go ahead with the three
Okay.
of us, because it's kind of, I like to think of it as a more informal meeting anyway tonight.
Right.
So help yourself to a ginger ale and some cookies, and
Well,
we'll.
thank you very much for bringing that.
Thank you.
So there was a number of little things that came up. We don't have public comments. I do need to announce that the planning board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recorded, so I don't forget that. No public comments. Did you get any written comments or anything from anybody?
Forgive me, did you actually call to order, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
should-
Call
Just
the
wanted
meeting
make
to
sure.
order,
I
declare a
apologize.
quorum present.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, I'm a little foggy tonight, so
It's the holidays.
it's the holidays and we, anyway, we're up late last night partying, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Went to the, well, we'll talk about it later.
Good
All
for
right,
you.
minute approval. December 4th minutes. Well, let's get that done. Everybody get a chance to read them? This was our very long meeting. Christina did a great job of putting it all together, I thought.
I did.
Anybody want to move to approve them? Need another minute? to
Can I
read 'em?
vote on it?
Yes,
Yes,
it's
you
an
can.
administrative action.
Yep.
As long as you have read them. And,
Yeah, I did.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
he did, okay.
Right.
You want to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion, oh, go ahead, sir.
No, that's quite all right. Go
Make a
ahead.
motion to approve minutes as presented.
I would second that motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was quick. Okay, so on this decision, and I know I bothered people so I apologize, but the final ruling we have, I was trying to figure out how to get this decision signed tonight on our special permit. You guys have all read it.
Mhm.
So we could move ahead. We're not hard against a time deadline, but you get into flu season and you never know, right? So, Josh sent us a note. You guys got it too. He's got an eye infection.
Yes.
He's really miserable. So he said he couldn't come. So then I thought, well, maybe we could use the Mullen rule, which is why I called you.
Mhm.
But it turns out that Lori says if we don't make major changes, and we have to decide that, but we can sign separately because the vote to do it's already been done. The decision is just a memorialization. Is that the word?
Official?
Of what we did.
Right.
Okay, so I had one little question, and it involves. I thought it was beautifully done. She really did a nice job capturing
it
all
does.
the important things. But where was it? I wrote this down somewhere. Okay, it's on, and I don't have this called up, maybe I can do this quickly. But under 6.1, it says, it was something she was talking about your comments in result to one of the findings. and it says business has discussed. And I think maybe what you meant is business has been discussed.
I'm sorry.
It was
I'm
six
sorry.
point one,
Under motions
no,
or recordings of findings?
recordings of findings. No, yeah, recordings of findings, I think.
Pardon me, are you in the minutes or are you in the?
I'm in the minutes.
I
I'm
got
just,
you.
from having read it before, I can find it. I'm
Apologize. I thought we
really
had gone through-
clumsy with this stuff, so I go
Okay, I'm
back
sorry, we
to.
already approved the
We have already
minutes.
approved the minutes, right?
Yes, not the minutes, but the decision. Now, that's in
So-
files
So-
too? No, it's attached.
I'm sorry, you're in 6.1 of the minutes?
No, I'm in 6.1 of the decision.
Okay, I was confused.
I go back to files to find it. No,
I'm sorry, ma'am, what are you
This is
looking
in
for?
regards
I'm
to the
looking for the
proposed use will
decision,
comply with
the
the bylaws
decision.
and regulations of the town, and I have it here.
okay.
Is this the one that you're referring to?
Yeah, this process has ascertained that the business has discussed. Do you mean has been discussed?
Are we,
This line.
okay. So just to read
'Cause if
this out,
it's-
let's read out loud what it says so
Yeah.
that people understand, what this is.
What
So it
page
says,
is that?
this is on page, this is on
Bottom right.
section 6.1.
Oh,
6.5,
okay. Yeah.
So I will read this out loud for the benefit of those who are viewing this here from the cable TV or post facto in YouTube. It says the chair makes a motion that the board find that the proposed use will comply with bylaws and regulations of the town and applicable laws and regulations of the Commonwealth. Francois Steiger seconds, and the board discusses supporting facts. 1. The process has ascertained that the business has discussed and shown that the business is in general compliance. 2. Also, resident comments have shown that the business gives back to the community.
Okay, maybe that's logical, I just didn't read it the way. The business, meaning the people representing the business, have discussed.
Correct.
Would it
And
have been better
shown.
to put in the applicants as opposed to the business?
The business, no, if he got the meaning and that's fine, I'm okay with it.
The business meaning the applicant, who is the business who's
Right.
making the
Yeah,
motion.
yeah, I
Right.
didn't understand it, but now he's
Now, which
clarified
page
it.
is that on?
I found no
Sorry, I
other,
don't know what page it is. There's no page numbers here.
Bottom right? No,
No.
that's the battery.
Give me a
Okay.
second. So this would be the 4th page.
you might put page numbers in it.
I have
Would you like
them.
me to amend the document? We
Right
can't
there?
sign
That's
tonight,
all.
I
No, 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 no.
accidentally brought the draft
You're-
copy.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
Yes, you need to
Oh.
make a decision.
Well, we have 2 members missing that have to sign it
Yeah,
anyway.
But we have to stop.
Oh, that's
Okay.
great.
All right, well then we can't sign because she doesn't have a signed copy. So can you stop in sometime this week
I can bring it when I see
Sure.
you on,
Absolutely.
okay?
on,
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
And if you would like me to come in tomorrow, I can certainly find some time if
Okay,
that's,
I am in the office tomorrow from 1 to 6.
1
okay.
to 6, okay? I have to, if not, Sunday.
Yes, if not Sunday. And would you like me to put page numbers on it now that I'm,
Yeah,
It would be
I
beneficial.
don't know, I think page numbers are helpful.
okay?
So the
That's not a
reading of
big
this
deal.
here satisfies your question and concern?
It
that you-
does,
Okay.
it does, and I wouldn't make any changes and I'm ready to sign it. Is that the same with all of you? We don't need to vote it again.
Okay.
I read it. I have no concerns or questions that have
Okay.
been, that come to my mind.
Okay. Okay. Nice job in writing this.
Thank you.
It's difficult to write decisions. So, next thing I want to talk about, because we have all these bylaws, this was our review thing, but I want to talk about sort of the general state of affairs here, which is particularly with the bylaw, marijuana bylaw and the sign bylaw, which are B and F on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
The marijuana bylaw, we have a community outreach hearing on January 6th with the select board.
For the current applicant,
With the current applicant, Damon Christopher? No,
Schmidt.
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 Yeah, Schmidt, I'm sorry. Anyway, and he's looking to fast track the permitting process to get a ground crop in the spring, he said at the last meeting. And I honestly think, I did meet with Ryan, and the select board and the town administrator really want to work with this guy because they want to take advantage of a new business in town if it can be done responsibly.
Okay, I agree with that.
So, Okay, and then there's the sign bylaw, which is a really tedious process,
Yes, it
and
is.
and it relates to this
But no.
discussion because Ryan also really, the Economic Development Committee and he and the Select Board would really like the new bylaw done in time for town meeting. So vote this spring. So we do have, I think, a very fortunate, although it's not maybe fortunate for Christina, but she has some available time for us, and we have money in an account that I think I can't imagine a better use for, which would be to buy some help with trying to create to finish this sign bylaw. It needs to be done,
Yes,
and I
it
spent
is.
3 days on it trying to make sense of it. This draft, you brought drafts, right?
I brought one copy. I didn't know if you wanted it distributed. You never told me.
Okay, anyway.
I can make other copies though here. Not a problem.
I mean,
Well, hold off for a minute
Okay.
while we're doing this discussion, because we can talk about it. Anyway, with the problem with the sign bylaw is, we got a lot of good ideas from Miller, but it wasn't strung together in any kind of a coherent document. So that's
Agreed.
what I was trying to do, is put a logical sequence to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which took a long time because there was a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of, and it has to be sequential. You know, it has to be like,
And I think we need less than more.
yes,
I
but
think it
most
gets
of all,
repeated a lot.
but
We
you
wanna make
can't
it
have
simple.
something worse than what we have now,
Right,
which
so
means,
we want to make it simple so people can look at it and say, this is what I need to have. And not
Right.
have it all just spread out and,
right. And that's an issue, because there's an art to that, to
yes,
simplifying.
it is.
So what I would like to do, and then with respect to the marijuana bylaw, the background on that, according to Todd, not Todd Miller, but
Ryan,
Ryan, was that when Tom was here and the town had voted it in, he thought, and maybe this is right, I have no idea, but that you could heavily rely on the regulations, because you can't get a permit for marijuana
Without going to the state.
without going to the state first. So he thought many of the things that would ordinarily be in a bylaw are already captured by the regulations. So the regulations are complicated and they go on, and what Christina would be willing to do for us is go through the regulations and create for us checklists
Oh, that'd be
of what's
awesome.
covered, what's not covered,
Oh, wow.
in areas where, like, for example, just simple things like setbacks and fencing and the kind of things that you would ordinarily find in a zoning bylaw. She could tell us, it's here, it's not here, and then we'd have at least a starting point for
Oh, that'd
looking
be
at that
awesome. It would
bylaw.
make it easier for us to do this.
So wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be, are you guys
Let's do
kind of
it.
on the same page here? So,
I am. I think we just also, I wanted to give it a little bit of a heads up. One of the things that I, for example, have been looking at, and it's very much based on some of the feedback that I've received from folks, is the manner in which the building, specifically not for the cultivation, but for the processing of the marijuana, need to comply with whatever laws there are. The reason is that this is an industrial component that has the ability to potentially use volatile compounds, which are very flammable and potentially hazardous to community. And I would like to ensure that if you are going to be reviewing the bylaw as well as whatever state regulations there are, that there is something at least on the state regulations with regards to that, which I personally have not been able to find. I'm not saying that they're not there.
Right.
I just have not been able to find them.
Right.
And so I'm bringing this up because communities in Colorado, communities in California and other places have had to put things into their bylaws because at the state level, that was not necessarily specified.
Right.
And so as a result of that, there have been additional things that have been mandated post facto because of accidents or
Right.
issues that have.
Environmental impact. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is great, you've come upon that information to really put it in here so we can get it started from the beginning.
So I just want to
Right,
emphasize that that's
right.
one of the areas that I'd like to focus on.
Right.
and
Okay.
he said no fumes, there would be no emissions from it,
He did.
and I want to know where that is. It kind of goes along with what you're saying, too.
To some extent it does,
Some
yes.
extent, yeah.
Yeah. I'm concerned that the building requirements that come along with that. I'm not saying that we are the building inspector, but we need to be able to point to those places where those regulations are in
Right.
place and ensure that our bylaws state that
Right.
any building regulations with regards specifically to the extraction of the either oils or other substances that come out of this here
Right.
do follow the guidelines and or the regulations for how these processing facilities need to be built in order to ensure the safety of our community.
No, I
We
agree.
also have regulations in the Board of Health and the town bylaws that say anybody that has an industrial site in town has to list all their chemicals and storage and the amounts and all that.
Correct.
Which kind of falls into that also.
It's also the matter that I didn't know that
Yeah.
I've looked into this a little bit in Gardner, what they've done as far as oversight. This isn't on a state level, but when they do a special permit, part of their special permitting process is that they make all cannabis come back every 3 years to special permit.
Yeah.
It is not indefinite like most special permits. They make sure so that they can then pay for the inspection every 3 years to make sure that they're operating within compliance of the bylaws, the then current bylaws. So if you put it into the special permit that the then current bylaws have to be adhered to every 3 years, then whatever you write into the bylaws now would then become.
So any amendments that take place have to be adhered to. That's a very good point. In addition to this here, I think we need to be very careful with what also, if somebody comes in and starts processing in a certain manner and way, and if they change by virtue of the fact they're using a new different technology, there has to be some feedback mechanism to the town, either the planning board, the board of health, whoever it is, the select board, to indicate what the new processing is, so it can be potentially evaluated and addressed either again with the zoning or with the board of health or with the building inspector to make sure that things are in compliance. The fact that you got a not a carte blanche, but a permit to
Right.
do the processing does not mean that you can just simply switch from one mechanism to the other from a processing perspective.
That could also be put into the special permit like we
Correct.
did with solar. We made solar do
Correct.
annual reports, and we stated that if they changed hands, they had to inform the planning board.
So things like that,
Yeah, that would work.
we may put that as part of our checklist.
Right.
That's where I'm going. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. So anyway, going along to our need for help, if you guys agree with it. I think that what we should do is, I know, Christine, you're gonna have to help me with the name of the account. What is the name of the account?
It's the revolving account.
The revolving account is authorize or appropriate, whatever the word is, $2,500 from that account for 100 hours of service. So it's $25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And for Christina to serve as our research assistant and consultant and draftsman
Mm-hmm.
on the sign bylaw and the marijuana bylaw. With not, we do have this issue that she may have employment elsewhere and not go through it. But if we appropriate it soon, we can grab the time she has
Okay.
available to us. And I don't want to put a hard deadline on, all this work's got to be done by such and such a date. But, as she
Can be
has
utilized.
time.
But it can be utilized.
Yeah.
That
But
makes a lot of
hopefully
sense.
would, maybe like a,
So this
over
would
the next
require a
2 or 3
motion for us
months.
to, at this point in time, to appropriate that, or to, what are we calling this? An appropriation of this funds from this account
Yes, from the,
for the purposes of,
motion has to state the amount of money being allocated for this.
Yep.
What account it's coming from, the planning board revolving fund.
right.
And then the vote that you authorize this to be used at a rate of $25 an hour or whatever it'll be. As Alice said, the reason I have this availability is I just found out through my other position that they don't need me next semester. There's a decrease in
awesome.
enrollment. So I am happy to give as many hours as I can. With that being said, I do actually need to be looking for employment.
We
So I will
understand.
give as much as I can towards that 100. I just can't at any point.
Right, right.
100 hours isn't enough for me to say, oh, I'll stop looking. You
Right,
know?
right.
I understand.
Well, I make that motion to appropriate $2,500 from our revolving account to be utilized for the purpose of
Researching,
researching
Research and writing,
writing, drafting,
drafting.
the regulations we talked about.
which are the ones for the
marijuana.
marijuana bylaw, as well as the sign bylaw.
Well, and at the rate of $25 an hour.
Yes, I see that.
Okay.
So you put the motion forth. I am seconding that motion.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So there's light at the end of the tunnel on this sign bylaw. All right,
And it's time well utilized, by the way, because we need this here. We need something that,
And we need it quickly.
well, as quickly as possible.
I know
Sooner than
most of
later.
you haven't seen my resume, but I do have contract analyst skills and technical writing background, so.
We-
it's
I
not-
understand that, that's why
Okay.
I
and
think
it's
this is a
very,
good
it's
time.
very apparent in how quickly she put things together. So, let's see, what is actually next on this?
Well, we-
Commercial marijuana, okay, but we can go through this
245
in order. Next is Article 25 is the moratorium. So what's happened is some of this is that the one that's out of date?
Yes.
Okay, so you can explain it, go ahead.
It was the concept that we've had at least one applicant come forward and say, remember she came with a presentation to give to the board, not realizing we now permitted non-marijuana cultivation, all because she misunderstood the moratorium was no longer in effect. And so
Correct.
the concept here was that did we want to strike the moratorium, or strike Article 21 from the bylaws because it's no longer applicable?
It's actually expired by its own terms.
It is, but it's still present in the,
Can we do that, or does it have to go by town meeting?
It would be,
all of these would have to go by town meeting, any kind of update to the zoning
Right,
bylaws.
right.
So the proposal here would be to remove that section from the town bylaw
Yes,
and then present this here as part of the hearing that we'll have eventually to the select board as our recommendation,
right,
which then goes through legal review,
right.
and then finally it goes into, back, I think, Finance Commission also
Yes.
approves or does not approve, and then finally it goes into the town meeting for a vote by the
Right.
people.
Speaking of which, it was also suggested that whatever bylaw updates we were looking into, we might want to discuss with the Board of Selectmen, because both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen do have the ability to either recommend or not recommend what we're working on, and the sooner we get them involved in the process, the sooner we can find out, oh yeah, they're on board with this, and we don't have to worry that we're writing these gigantic new bylaws, and then they're going to vote to not
Right, right.
recommend, and then suddenly it doesn't go through town meeting because we didn't. So that was just a suggestion.
so you would do that before we would go to the hearing for the public.
I would suggest doing that as soon as we have something closely resembling a working draft, just so you send it over and let them know this is what we're working on.
Okay,
We would like to enlist your feedback so
Right.
that we make sure that even before it goes to public hearing, we have you're on board
Right.
with this. That would be my suggestion.
I think that's good. I think also there's no reason why we can't bundle C, which is this moratorium, along with the punch list of items, or the bylaw, let's see, that punch was subdivision regulations, but Christina has a punch list of other, do you have them with you tonight?
It's actually in your drive, punch list. It's called punch list for document
But it's not,
changes.
it's not subdivision.
Oh, wait, a
Here.
subdivision is in there. If you
Okay.
want to look on
All right.
in Google Drives, it says there's a punch list for Hubbardston general bylaw, zoning bylaw, earth removal rules and regulations, subdivision rules and regulations.
You might
Yeah, I
help
see
me with
that.
this.
All of these were submitted either separately or
Hello.
No, welcome.
Hello.
Can you get me there?
yes. 1 second. So, you want to keep open your Google Drive.
We're in the Google Drive.
Okay.
It could also be here, right?
Yeah. But this takes you right to your shared drive. Yeah, the reason I say you want to leave it open is because we're all operating off of the same server. And so it gets a little slow when there's 7 people trying to get to the same place.
Okay, I will, take a minute and bring John up to date. While we try to get this here.
Yep.
So, our first issue was actually, the decision on your special permit that involved you.
Yes.
And it only involves you to the degree that, we got a ruling from the town clerk.
Yep.
That if we approve the draft, which was really well done, and you've had a chance to read it too, I believe. We only need to go in and sign.
Okay.
So, we're all gonna try to get that done in the next day or two.
Mhm.
She didn't bring a signing draft, and, Josh has some eye infection, and it's not a great night.
And Craig's not here either.
And Craig's not here either, he's plowing roads, I'm sure.
Yep.
But I did send you the draft.
I did see it. Thank you.
Help yourself to some, here, pass it. Have something to eat too, here.
Thank you.
It's Christmas. Anyway, so, and then after that, the other thing we've done, John, is, appropriate some money
Yes.
for, Christina, who has some extra time to help us with the zoning bylaw
Mhm.
and to help us with the marijuana issues coming before us.
Yep.
Which may involve also bylaw changes. And then where we are is on 4C, and the moratorium that she is talking about, there was a moratorium while we developed a marijuana bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's expired by its own terms, but we need to like eliminate it from the bylaws because
Right.
it isn't self-eliminating.
And then here's the punch list.
And then, all right, and then she's helping me a lot. Okay, so, oh, I did see this. All right. Can everybody else get to that?
I have it.
Can John find it? Everybody's much more.
What are you looking at, the punch list?
Punch
now,
list.
right?
Punch list.
list.
So these would be the other things which we might bundle
Back to your drive.
with the one hearing on the moratorium,
Yes.
and hopefully maybe the signed
Go to
by
my
law
drive.
too. But they would need both a hearing because of the
Go back till you see
the
my
law that governs.
You're in shared drives, John.
share drive, right
Okay.
there, share. Up, down one.
Sheets?
Okay,
Anyway,
go
they,
back.
they include, while he's looking,
Go back.
amend the timetable from 30 to 45 days to allow time for the tree warden to review
Go on the drive.
and to get the posting lead time and so forth. So that's a timetable. It's a,
This came up from our last scenic
Sure.
road bylaw. This was an issue because we actually had to request an extension of the applicant when there was a delay with the tree warden.
And
Most of them
punch
have
list.
60 days, like special permits have 60 days to have a public hearing after the application. For some reason, scenic road bylaws were truncated to 30, and I had discussed with the chair possibly bringing it up to 45 to allow just for the possibility of a little bit of delay.
yeah. So, Article 22, that's the marijuana, you know, the wording in the marijuana bylaw that was so confusing, because
Mhm.
it says require a special permit, and then it was not in one of the requirements, so you had to go up to the heading.
Right,
So
right.
it's that, to fix that glitch. I don't know, Christina, you can tell me what 35.53 is.
It was just a numbering error. These are all formatting errors. I didn't know, as I said, with regards to punch lists, it's supposed to be 35.5.1.3. Instead it goes from 35.5.3,
Okay.
which is just an issue there. And then again, you have another
Oh,
issue,
reference, yeah.
a reference that it says it's section 3.4. It's actually 4.9 of the zoning bylaws.
It's costing-
These are just things we've all come across as we're going through the bylaws. It's like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So these are we decided to start a punch list. I think I emailed all of you. So if you
Mhm.
found them, I asked you to please send them to me so that we could have something. If we decide to start submitting bylaws changes for the year, we can have a public hearing and do more than
All of
one at
them.
a time.
Right. So,
I have one more that I'd like to add, if you would like to take that now.
Would you
Sure.
mind emailing me just because that way I can
Not a
have
problem.
but tell us.
Yes.
I will just indicate that there is a typo on Article 16,
Mm-hmm.
which is the zoning, under the zoning bylaw. It's the open space residential development, which is, say, at this point in time, development.
Got it.
So there's a typo there. And that's in the title itself.
Got it. I will write that in my punch list then. Thank you.
And then
Okay,
there's
so
some
no email-
others.
No email required?
No, I have it now. I just didn't want, if it was too complicated, I wanted to make sure I had it written down, but I have it here.
I have these, I see my name and I have no recollection of these things, so I
You
apologize.
emailed them to me, which is why we have them.
Oh, well, add page numbers, cause it's annoying to have a document without page numbers.
Yes.
28, B, standards of operation.
Right, at the moment it states that they're allowed to bury any inorganic material as opposed to any organic material during reclamation. That means they could bury a truck but not a tree.
Right.
So, I don't think they meant to put that in, so I figure we should probably put in organic material as opposed to inorganic material.
And I'm sorry, this is in what element of the?
This
I'm
is
sorry.
in the earth removal rules and regulations, which is a document that is separate from the
Yes.
bylaws.
Oh, does that require?
That does not require town meeting, it does require a public hearing.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, well, we can do it at the same public hearing, but remember to separate it out.
Yes.
And I'm
And-
sorry, what does it currently state? It says,
In section B, standards of operation, site restoration, it states that the applicant is permitted to bury any inorganic material.
It's
is
permitted.
permitted. So I think they meant organic material, not inorganic material.
I would hope that that's what they meant, because.
But that's what it currently
Yeah.
states in the bylaw, which is,
An inorganic material can be anything from ferrous metal to uranium to
Yes,
any
I know.
other thing
Anything
that is
other
not
than organic.
Anything that
Yes.
is not carbon based.
yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Quick, gotta use that loophole.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's a good catch.
Yeah, I was a little concerned by that one when I saw it, because I knew we were going through reclamation at the time, so I was reading it very carefully.
Thank you.
And the other one's a numbering problem, the next one, just there's two sections, C. So that's also the rules and regs?
Yes.
is.
Oh, yeah, I see up
There are
there,
two
the brown
sections,
heading,
C.
I get it, all right.
Yep. And then the last one is for subdivision rules and regulations. And then there was a concept of updating that to indicate that ANRs, the fee is per lot or not. That was a discussion that never actually got a lot of traction with the board. There was are we actually charging per lot? How much per lot? I mean, it's in our fee schedule as per lot, but does that mean if you create one into two? You know, we had a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
long discussion about that.
Do you remember this issue? The issue was, if you have one lot and you subdivide it by two, and the fee is $200, what is it?
$275, I believe, at the moment.
It's fairly expensive, because, you know, you do have to have the engineer review the plans and everything. So, per lot, and this was what we had done with these fees, and I don't know whether this was before John joined the board, but they hadn't been amended since 2000, so we adjusted them by the cost of living, so this is where we are. So, but it says, it's just this flat fee per lot.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you take one lot and you divide it in two lots, do you charge them for two lots or one lot,
Right.
right?
And what about vice versa, if you're combining two lots into one lot?
Actually, that requires land court. We don't do that in an A&R.
Okay, right,
Oh,
yeah, not as an
oh,
A.
good.
All
Oh
right,
my
good.
gosh. Anyway,
All right,
Tom,
good point.
I don't know, the prior practice was per lot, I guess. I mean, would be two lots. But I did a survey, I called a lot of towns around, and I said, and asked them, what do you do for your A&R? It turns out everybody has this issue. And people deal with it in different ways, but they tend to have like a low fee, and so they charge for both, or a high fee and they charge for one.
Yep.
So we need to clarify that, and then we need to clarify it. And some of them actually, they say, well, when you do two lots, you really have to do the land calculations for the lot that's left over. You gotta do all of that work anyway,
Mhm.
so it's fair to charge for two, and there's the point to that. And one of them does 1.5.
Yep.
One for the lot, one for any half remaining lot. I don't know how you wanna do it, but we could just do for every, you know, it's tricky how you do it. You have to, for every newly created lot, cause they're both newly created, but you could say, but excluding the lot from which, the new lot was, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That means that
Some-
if you're creating two lots out of one, you're creating one new lot,
Yeah,
or you're creating two new
yeah,
lots.
yeah. That's
So-
the issue. Do you
okay, so-
charge, or do you not, do you charge double or not?
It might be helpful to know how much it costs us
Well,
to do that, to perform it.
275 is what we heard, right?
I'm sorry, it's $250. I just checked our fee schedule.
270.
$250 is what we agreed upon as our fee.
Right.
We don't pay the surveyor. We do not have to have a public hearing.
So what is our cost?
We do have to have a public hearing.
No,
No,
there's,
we
I
have
don't
to
believe
notify
it.
abutters.
I don't believe so. It's because it's an approval not required.
An
Yeah.
A&R plan, you don't notify abutters?
I
Yep.
don't believe so. I'd have to look this up. I
Yeah.
don't want to say anything.
Anyway, it
on
does,
record.
realistically, it doesn't charge twice, cost twice the amount,
Right.
because you know, you look at it as the whole.
Right.
My only
And we do
concern is-
have quite a,
Yeah, because if we're not looking to make money off of it, then I don't know that we need
That's
to
not the
double
purpose of it.
charge, right? So if we're, if we know what it costs, it might help us to decide how we should treat it at 1.5 or whatever, if we knew exactly what the costs involved were.
If I had enough acreage to split my lot and go and give the other lot to my family, you know, I don't wanna charge a lot for that type of thing.
So,
it could be one lot divided into three too, and
Right,
then you
mhm.
charge for two, would be.
or 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So, I
Right.
mean, if you have a person or individual who has, say, for example, 100 acres, and they're going to now divide that into 20-acre lots, now you suddenly have 5 lots.
Right,
What's the differential there versus a family who comes here and says, look, I'm going to give this lot to my daughter, and I'm staying with this lot here.
Right.
And how can you word that to be fair?
Some have stated that, you know, for the first 2 lots, and then beyond that, it's an additional
Okay.
fee.
I think that makes sense.
That's
That
a
would
good
be
idea.
fair.
Mhm.
I've seen that in several places, because
Correct.
I did look into this as well.
So,
That sounds
so
better.
if it is just as a simple subdivision into 2 separate lots,
Right,
it is considered to be a one fee.
right,
Any additional lots beyond the subdivision of 2
right,
would therefore be the same fee per lot.
right.
So if
Okay.
you're
Do you think-
dividing it into 10 lots, that would be the first lot divided into 2.
Right,
So you, out of that,
Right.
you have 8 remaining lots that have to be
Full
also,
price.
right,
Full
full
price.
price.
Right.
okay?
Do you wanna draft that?
I can,
If she drafts it and brings it back to us, we do have to have a hearing, I believe, on an amendment to a zoning regulation.
it's a rule and regulation. We
Rule
have
and
to have- we
regulation,
have to
not,
have
not
hearing.
notice to anybody, but we have to
Well,
declare
Gardner
hearings.
News has to be
Oh, the guard,
noticed.
okay. You wanna put that together for us? I don't think we have to wait any longer to do that. And it'll come up again and again, it'll always come up.
Right, no, we can take care of it.
And
So-
there would also be fees, we would do the fee at the same time, because it's in the
Yes,
subdivision
yes.
rule, right?
Yeah, put those 2 together and we'll have one hearing and we'll try to at least fix that. We were hoping, I was kinda holding off because Bill Murray has said he's gonna go through our subdivision rules and regulations and try to bring them up to date.
Mhm.
And, yeah, I think it's a bigger job than he bargained for, or he's really busy, I don't know. He keeps it like, well, maybe next month.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
can do these, you can check with Bill too.
Okay.
And if he's coming in, we'll hold off on the hearing and hear what he has to say and do them all. But I have a feeling, that may come in dribs and drabs too, you know. We shouldn't wait on these 2. You should fix things if you know you've got a problem, is my view. So to get back to my document,
Go over here, you see that little arrow?
this arrow, yeah,
Click it, and then you're back to
the whole
the
menu,
whole, and then you
okay.
just open up the
Well, you
next
can't do
document
alt
you need.
tab with this.
Sorry guys, I'm really
This
not,
isn't Windows, this is very, very basic Chrome.
Chrome OS.
Yeah.
and I'm an Apple user and I have no idea. I've been working on it though. I also can't remember anything anymore, so. It's a problem. All right, let's see, okay, so we've done the moratorium.
So
Do you
can I-
wanna
can I-
talk?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
We've already gone through these here. What do we need to do now that we've gone through this here? I mean, we have not only a quorum. What is the logical next step with this here?
Well, the logical next step, in my opinion, what I was discussing with Alice was the concept that if we're going to pick 2 and move forward, is marijuana. I mean, we can do the small ones like the ANR, but I feel that tackling something like earth removal or solar, at the same time you're also trying to tackle signs and marijuana, might be a little bit more than the board can handle.
You mean
but
for
it's up to
today
you.
or?
No, in general, like, are we gonna try and get all of these done by the warrant? I feel that's a little bit, industrious. Might be
Well-
biting off more than you can chew.
I would like to state that from my perspective, I have some understanding in terms of what my, what I would like to put forth also.
Okay,
Is
And
it
so-
complicated?
Not yet, because you can always make it complicated, right? I mean, I think we've heard a lot of issues and items being brought up in the
Right.
past. I mean, the fact that you're working, say, for example, on getting some of the marijuana components looked at, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Right.
Will we be able to get everything in place before the town meeting? Maybe, maybe not. So
Right.
I'm satisfied with that approach. With regards to the solar, on the other hand, I believe that at this point in time, there are some deficiencies as
Mhm.
they are currently stated in the bylaws.
okay,
And there's also been strong expression about reviewing them and putting some structure around it and
Right.
potentially even some restrictions on that.
right,
So I would like to also prioritize that and not just leave that until the following year, because I believe very strongly that come 2020, there's going to be a big push to open up again the solar market and doing it in a manner that there's probably going to be some land grabs going on. That's why I'm concerned about this year.
Also, with regards to earth removal, we were talking about the 500 cubic yard rule.
Correct.
So it's a matter of which ones come first.
Well, and
I'm
there's,
not-
we don't
it's-
have to tackle the whole thing. What I'm
Right.
saying is we need to potentially tackle certain sections and certain aspect of it in order to make them more proof for, so that we can get through those loopholes that we have. So in the
Right.
earth removal case, I think we have a very big loophole at this point in time with a very simple set of amendments, we can probably get something done there. And that's just my opinion, Madam Chair. I'm not suggesting that's the only way of doing it.
So what you're thinking is instead of revamping each of them in depth, we just fix the glaring loopholes in each one,
I
and
think
then
there's-
look at them again later.
I agree. There's
that makes
glaring
sense.
loopholes in some cases. And in other cases, I think there are potentially sections that we can really grasp. Good example in the solar case, there are, as an example, there's definitions that are really truly not definitions. They're actually requirements set within the definitions, which is totally incorrect.
Right.
And then, in my opinion, there's also the discussion about how potentially an overlay district would work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a question as to whether or not an overlay district is certainly something that we would like to put in place.
Mhm.
And how do we go about doing that? It may be too big for us to tackle this year. We should be able to understand whether or not that's the case or not. And if it is, then we can potentially put some structure around this year, and the following year start working on maybe some more comprehensive efforts for a solar overlay district.
Any recommendations how we could do this quickly on those three?
Well,
To,
I think that the moratorium itself, I'm sorry, not the moratorium, the earth removal,
Right.
we currently have a very big glaring loophole.
Mhm.
And it's the loophole of 500 cubic yards.
Yes.
So that an amendment that is potentially very simple, which is maybe bring that down to a very smaller, much smaller number, which makes it much more difficult for somebody to take advantage of that loophole.
Right.
Would be a very simple amendment. Yes.
why do we have to have that section in there at all? Is that required by the law, or?
No.
We could have all commercial earth removal required first permit. We wouldn't have to say 500 cubic yards or anything.
Correct.
So
It
I
could
have
be.
another question for you too. Is earth removal bylaw is a general bylaw, it's not a
Yes.
zoning bylaw.
Yes.
So how do we go about amending? Do we have that authority?
We would again, I believe we have to get the Board of Selectmen involved, and it is definitely a town meeting
Yes.
vote.
Yeah, I
With
know it's a
regards
town
to
meeting
the
vote, but
earth
is it?
removal, I would have to look at the MGL also for what people are allowed to take off their own private property by right. Because the moment you say, oh, you can't take off anything without a permit, I wanna make sure the MGL doesn't allow you to immediately say, oh, if you want to replace the topsoil in your front yard, who's to say that's not 500 cubic yards right there? I
No,
don't
and
know if
there's
maybe
some-
the 500
there-
cubic
there are-
yards is put in
there
there
are
for a
some-
reason.
There's some very clear delineations specifically for farms, for personal,
Got it.
et cetera.
Septic, so forth, yeah, there's
Septic, et
quite a
cetera.
list.
Yes,
Right.
there's quite a long list of things like that
Right.
basically take that into consideration.
Okay.
We're really looking more at the commercial earth removal, like the gravel pits or
Right.
sand pits or clay pits that have existed in the town.
Okay. I'll also look at local, our benchmarking towns and find out how they manage it.
Okay.
Okay? I mean,
What, is a conceptual thing? What would you like to see done with that? I think
with,
with that, I'm looking
The
for
earth
that
removal?
provision, I have it here somewhere. It's a very short bylaw.
yeah, it is,
Yes.
pardon me. No, but I think I have it here. Let me
If you go into the, it's actually on the Google Drive,
Mhm.
and then all you have to do is type in Control F to do a find, and then earth removal is, page 31, Alice,
Page, oh, okay, yeah.
On the general bylaws.
in the general bylaws.
I'm on that, I found that, I'm just looking for the 500,
Okay.
and there are rules and regulations, so it might be in the rules and regulations too.
I'm not finding it.
It's under section, page
Oh, yeah.
33, section 4, general provisions. No person, firm, or corporation shall excavate in any 1 year more than 500 cubic yards
Oh,
of
yeah.
earth from any land in the town without first obtaining an earth removal permit as provided in the following sections.
Where's that in here?
Page 33, ma'am. At
33?
the very end, E.
Oh. No person, firm, or corporation shall excavate in any
Page 31.
1 year more than 500 cubic yards of earth from any land without first obtaining an earth removal permit as provided in the following sections. All right, but there are exceptions. And I think, I do have a tag with the 500 actually.
That's in section 6 is exemptions, ma'am, page
We're in the
34.
zoning bylaws, these are the general bylaws.
Okay, so we got the 500 cubic foot rule, and then we have the exemptions. A permit shall not be required at all for the following, so it wouldn't apply for this. Removal of earth incidental to and reasonably required in connection with the construction of any building, a pertinent walkway, driveway, septic system, swimming pool, or other accessory use, and expansions there too, for which all permits required by the town of Hubbardston have been granted, provided that the quantity of material moved shall not exceed that displaced by the portion of the building or accessory use below grade. So that makes sense, right? Foundation, you can take that much out to anything. B, removal of earth in the course of customary agricultural use of land. C, removal of earth in compliance with the specific requirements of an approved subdivision plan, not including individual house lots, lot development, in compliance with specific requirements, okay, of a subdivision plan. D is, normal use for a cemetery. E is removal of earth from land in public use. But the town has to develop a transition plan for its earth removal, which
Yeah.
is sort of what kicked off the discussion about our gravel pit. And F, removal of the earth for construction, maintenance, repairs to roadways, fire ponds.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
And G on the other side, one more, removal of earth on a single lot involving an excavation of no more than 500 cubic yards or less in 1 year. That's kind of a big loophole, because one lot could be anything, could be a 100-acre lot, right?
Mhm.
So the two things, if you're trying to put a lid on the that 500 without a permit, it appears twice.
Well, there is the section 4, which I think is really the one that is in question, which are the general provisions, which is no person, firm, or corporation shall excavate
41.
in any 1 year
It was 31.
more than 500 cubic yards of earth from any land in the town without first obtaining an earth removal permit as provided in the following sections. Right?
Yes, except that I think that
And then section 6 goes along with that.
section 6G here.
6G,
G,
very
yeah.
specifically, yes.
So I'm just trying to figure out what, I mean, there's nothing that would prevent a gravel pit, somebody that wants to remove within 500, they just need to get a permit for it, but then they've gotta comply.
Correct.
And I don't know whether the reluctance to comply is a matter of the cost of the permitting or the fact that they've gotta submit a remediation plan in order
Both.
to get a permit,
Or both.
or both, but, and I don't know what kind of pushback we're gonna get, but, or why it was put there in the first place, but if you have an amount you have in mind, we can have Christina try to draft it in.
I think
And bring it to
the
vote.
issue that comes to play here is that in order to get, and I'm opening it up for discussion. The issue is here that in order to, the requirement for a special for a permit with 1,000 cubic yards.
Mhm.
If you leave your pit fallow and every year just simply harvest 500 cubic yards,
Mhm.
in 2 years, you, for all intents and purposes, without having to file a special permit, without having to file a remediation plan or anything like that, you in theory can basically remove sufficient material that can damage or create, excavation out of that area in twice the amount of time, but for all intents and purposes, you can still do so. And that's the loophole that we have currently with some of the gravel pits that are supposed to be closed.
Which is the one that Craig called about.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right.
So,
So you could go two ways, right? You
Or
could
you-
limit the number of yards per year, or you could limit the total number of lifetime yards removed without a permit. So you could say you could remove 500 yards in the lifetime of owning the property.
it'd be hard to enforce.
Right.
I think that'd be
all
very-
of these would be
yeah.
hard to
And that's the
enforce.
problem.
And then,
How to-
in addition to
Right.
this here, the whole issue is how do you know it's 500 yards?
Right.
Right.
Because the biggest issue we have right now is if somebody goes in, says they've removed 500 yards, how do you know it was not 1,000 yards or 1,500 yards?
Right.
Unless you have
10,000.
somebody out there.
Yep. Yeah, and you have the same problem, but even if you say 100 yards a year, we have the same problem. How do you know it was 100 yards? How do you know it was all done this
Right.
year?
Correct. So I think there's two things that need to be addressed here. One is bring down the quantity to a point where it becomes a matter of controlling this.
Mhm.
And second is that if a permit is required, that permit then, and that is what Christina was saying earlier, on a permit you can actually not only grant it, but you can put stipulations around that permit.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And that might include, say, for example, that it has to be monitored by I don't know, somebody who is authorized to do the validation or the count of the number of trucks that come in or out and the amount of gravel that, or material that is actually being removed. Does that make sense? Any
Cause
questions?
did you look at how big is 500 cubic feet of,
You know those
Gravel.
huge trucks that we were talking about,
The triaxles,
the triaxles, they can take up to 30 cubic yards.
this is 500.
And this is 500. So we're talking about a total of roughly about 16 to 20 trucks, just under 20 trucks.
Right. Per year, and I think that's the
Per-
problem.
that-
Yes.
Per year.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, do we have, I mean,
and what,
we,
let me
where
ask
do you
this
wanna go
question.
with this discussion? You wanna put something on the table, want more research?
Well, the
Yes.
reasoning we're going after this too, I wanna put it out to the public. The reason why we discuss this and talk about it, to set it and control it better, would, the purpose would be to not destroy the land side, correct? Without any control of them doing that. If we go see a
Right.
permit 10 years ago, I mean, a pit, and it was looking nice, and all of a sudden we go back 5, 10 years later, and it's a huge gutter hole, and it's a mess, and that's the whole purpose behind what we're talking about, correct?
Excellent point.
Yeah, because over 10 years, if you can remove 500 yards a year, you
Right.
significantly damage the property.
Correct.
Right, if you get down too close to the water table, you've killed it.
Especially if you don't
Yeah.
have a mitigation plan down the road. I mean, we're not against people doing what is right, but as long as they have to do it in a correct manner. And this is a loophole, and I think we need to close this loophole.
Do you,
My-
I mean, the earth removal,
For the earth
rules and
removal.
regulations does state they're only supposed to have a certain number of acres open at one time, but if you have no permit on them, how do you know?
Correct.
Exactly. And many of the pits that we currently have, I am sure exceed that acreage. So, may I make a suggestion? And that is we are meeting again in January.
yes,
There are two stipulations that I think we need to look at in terms of the earth removal. One is the limitation of the quantity, and the second is make sure that anything above that requires obviously a special permit. And
an earth removal permit.
an earth removal permit, right? So bring the, I think it's very simple to bring this down to what would be considered to be a feasible number. And I think we need to put potential wording around this here, that this is really for commercial extraction of material. This is not that somebody comes in and extracts material for the purposes of
Correct.
building a house or
Correct.
building, say, for example, a septic system or something that is reasonable, for the population that lives here.
Right.
Correct.
But
Is this
when you eliminate all the exemptions, is the bylaw doesn't apply to all these things,
Mhm.
is there anything left but commercial?
I think we need to state that.
Okay, and we need to get rid of G.
Correct.
Well-
But or leave G, I mean, there may be reasons why somebody's going in and, I mean, I'm not a construction person, but I have to assume, and maybe we need to have that discussion, as part of the public hearing, why is 500 a reasonable number? Should it really be 100 cubic yards?
Is it somewhere in the MGL?
There is nothing to the best of my knowledge, because I looked into
I
this
know,
here.
so
I-
did I.
I
I haven't been
think-
able to find it.
I think that if you have all of these exemptions,
Mm-hmm.
what you're left with is everything else requires a permit. So we're not saying you can't do it, we're just saying you gotta get a permit to do it.
Yeah,
Right?
because I mean, even
'Cause
if
you
we,
could take quite a bit, like one of these is a whole subdivision. Well, I've done big subdivisions
Mhm.
where there's a lot of material removed
Correct.
and relocated and so forth. So that's a big hole there too.
Yeah,
But it's allowed because it is regulated.
and
It's
it's a
looked at by an
subdivision.
engineer,
Exactly.
right?
you
so
know,
I-
even allowing 100 a year could still be a problem over if
Correct.
every year they remove 100. So,
There's 3 major
We had
dump
that
trucks,
occur
right?
up on Gardner Road years ago, up by your residence,
mhm.
where they went in and, they started a gravel operation without knowledge of anything. A huge area up there, and it got found by mistake. And, that became, do you ever hear the history of that?
No.
That was, I'd like to bring that forward later just for the information though. There was a lot going on up there, and there was just an operation that was never permitted, never approved, and they hauled a lot of material out of there.
Right.
And it created a lot of problems.
I almost
Is that
wonder
the wet
if
where
any
they-
commercial removal of of
Is that the
material
one
should require
Christopher
a
was
permit.
involved with, who was here speaking to us? Where they crossed a stream too and got the whole state involved for endangered
Yes,
species?
yes.
Yeah, that was a big mess. So we could actually say, all commercial gravel removal requires a permit. I mean, it can be,
Yeah.
you don't have to have an exception.
Right.
Yes,
I think that's the way to go.
I think that's probably the way to go.
Okay.
Can we, we're not gonna do this tonight anyways, but can, to change it, correct? Are we voting to change this right now?
No,
Okay.
I think what we're saying is we need to, I don't wanna put words on you out, the way I'm looking at this here is we need to make sure that we got the wording right.
Correct.
I don't think we're gonna get the wording right tonight. I think the
Right.
principle is, and I think we're getting to this here, which is to take G and indicate or either 6G or 4 on the general provisions E to very clearly specify that any commercial excavation and removal of earth material requires a special permit.
Okay, well, do you wanna make a motion to just have Christina develop a draft for our consideration, or maybe you don't even need a motion, but,
No, I don't think we
I
need.
Well, I like that.
Yes,
okay?
that's what I
Just
would
And
like
those
to.
would be what we're looking for.
Got it.
My
All
question
commercial.
is, what was listed here now, under section 6, of all the exemptions, were they put in there for a specific reason we might not know about? Would ours changing this
Well-
section of what we're proposing to put in there, would that still cover all these?
Well-
I wanna make sure we don't open another hole, that's all.
Well, well, the way I'm reading this here, the permit shall not be required for the very following reasons. So, and it goes very specifically into
Okay.
the connection of construction of any building, a permit, etc. The agricultural use, compliance with the specific requirements in subdivision planning, earth removal for use of cemetery, etc. So,
So
the
we're gonna
only-
leave those in there?
I think we
Yeah,
leave
we'll
those.
leave
in.
those.
Oh, okay,
Only
that's
G.
fine.
Yes,
All we
it's
do is
only
get rid of
G
G.
that would be,
Oh,
in
that's
this case,
fine.
would be removed.
Because G is the same thing, it allows any single lot, which could be 100 acres, right,
Exactly.
Bill?
Right,
to take,
right.
To take the 500, so you could scratch one and they could get it out, the
Right,
500 out
right,
the
right.
other, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Christina's gonna do that,
All right, awesome.
and that probably doesn't fix everything that needs fixing in this bylaw, but
It
at least
helps.
it's something that would move it forward and fix a major hole.
This is the loophole that we have identified, yes.
And again, this still has to go to vote on
Select
the
board.
town,
Yes, it has to go through
Ultimately.
town council and has to be a hearing,
and then go to town meeting.
yes, has to go
Nice.
through all those steps.
Okay.
But I do think, it does complement, we have been looking at gravel pits all year
Mm-hmm.
and trying to bring in compliance.
Right.
So this is not a shot in the dark, it's, something we're very
Based on
much
reality.
involved with.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Okay, so moving along, cause I do wanna do a little with signs too, but I'm willing to talk about what we could do with solar. The person who appears before us all the time wants it out of
Well,
residential zones, but unfortunately, residential and agriculture
Or the whole
are
town.
the same, so I think there are other fixes you could do. An overlay, I think, would require, in order to pass legal muster, would have to bear some reality as to where they could be put.
mm-hmm.
You can't say, well, the transmission lines are on the east side of town, we're only gonna allow the solar
Right.
fields on the west side of town.
Right,
So
right.
I think that you do need, some expertise on that area to develop an overlay zone. There are maybe other things you could do, which would say no solar fields on areas less than a certain size. Work with the setbacks, work with some of those restrictions that are kind of a Band-Aid approach. You could do a moratorium, although we just passed the bylaw that's a few years ago. So,
But it's not unheard of that, given the growth that has taken
Right.
place, that a moratorium be put in place until
Right.
such a time where a revised
Solar bylaw.
solar bylaw can be put in place again.
well, this is another issue. I mean, tonight's the night where we're talking about what we want to do with these things that have been coming up over and over.
Point
Yeah.
of order, I did speak with the CTPC with regards to your zoning overlay training, and they would like you guys to stipulate which days are available. They need 2 or 3 dates that they could come out and train you.
Excellent.
Well, that's good news.
And they
We
would
just need
pick
to
one.
coordinate it on, have they indicated their availability in general?
No, they said that you give them 2 to 3 dates, and then they will assign someone to come out and train you.
Well,
How long is the training?
They didn't say. They didn't say. Depends also on what questions you have, how many people are here, etc.
but it's 1 day training,
It is.
okay, and it's, I'm not assuming it's a full day training, it's a half a day or maybe
No, it's probably like 3 to 4 hours max.
Okay. Something can only happen during the weekdays, or can they do, are they flexible?
I don't know. I didn't ask for weekdays or weekends. I from the list that we got online, I didn't see any weekend days for the small ones that they had in Leominster. And then, did you see any weekend?
Well, that's because
Yeah, but-
they typically work with, cities and towns.
Right.
So a question to ask them is if
Okay.
perchance
Yeah.
they may have something available, let's say, for example, on a Saturday.
Okay. The only thing is, we would then have to wait a month to discuss again what dates are available. So would you rather not propose any dates while I get that information back?
Well, that's one way of doing it, but
And
the
that's
other way
fine.
of doing it is to provide you with, I mean, I can tell you, for example, between now and the end of the year, very
Yeah.
difficult
Right. Well.
because of the holidays. In January myself, I
Mhm.
am out as of the 8th
Mhm.
for 10 days.
Okay.
So I'll be out from the 8th to the 18th. Other than that, I am available, but I'm working. And so during the daytime, that's my problem. So for me, weekends would be the best way of doing it unless I figure out another way of,
So you will not be at the meeting on the 15th.
I would not be available then.
Okay.
What about other Saturday mornings? Can you get, I know my
Let me
Saturdays are
find
really
out if
busy.
Saturdays are available.
But if they're available, is it, I mean, before we request them, is it out of the question for anybody to make it on a Saturday? Could you, if it was 3 hours on a Saturday
As
morning?
long as I have some notice and can arrange childcare,
Yeah.
I can probably be there.
My
Bill?
biggest thing is my schedule. I could probably do a Saturday with advance
Okay,
notice.
so inquire of them,
Of
if they have
Saturdays.
Saturdays available after September, January
January 1st.
15th.
After the, after the middle of January. Got it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Because we
And
don't
if you
wanna,
want-
And then discussion of schedule does not fall under OML, so as long as I coordinate and
That's what I
nobody
was-
tries to reply all, I
yeah.
think we can still manage getting this done.
That's what I was going to suggest, and that
We
is,
don't
that let's coordinate that through you via email.
Yeah, because
Right,
as long
right.
as it's only scheduling and nothing else is discussed, I'm allowed to do that
Okay.
through OML.
but this would be we'd have to post it though, right? Because we're all in the same room or not?
It depends on whether or not you were willing to be passive listeners. I was looking into this, and if no discussion is had of practical application of the training, I believe you can all be in the same room, but I have to call OML about this. CTPC's understanding is you guys could all be in the room and it doesn't have to be posted as a public hearing as long as none of you go, oh, we could do that for the Cataisto pits, because then you're starting to have
So
discussion.
my suggestion is let's find a date. The
Mhm.
coordination of the date is certainly something that we can do with you.
Right.
Once we know what that date is, I think we can post it as a meeting.
Okay, you could do it as a public hearing, but then the public would have the right to come to
And
take part in the thing, which is fine.
which-
And it is $400. I want to remind you that the planning board will be fronting that cost.
Yes,
And that is the charge no matter how many people come?
That is the charge.
okay.
But we do want to try to get us there because as many people as we can on our board. And maybe it
Now-
would be worth posting it so we could discuss specific situations we have in town, I don't know.
Should we open this up to any other board? Is that appropriate?
I think that's completely appropriate if you wanted to have the invite the board of selectmen and say we're looking at zoning overlays for possible bylaw changes, and we're inviting you to something we've arranged with the CTPC.
I think economic development too,
There
and
you go.
anybody
I bet-
else.
I think definitely.
Yeah.
I can
Well, I
do
think we
else
should
would like
send
things.
notification to the selectman's office or the town administrator probably,
Right.
that this is what
Once
we're
we get this
proposing to
arranged,
do.
I agree. We'll decide on the time or the day, and then we'll post it to the economic and
Yes,
to the
I think
TA.
it's-
post it out to the town, anybody wants to
Right.
go.
I think it's a very valuable
Okay.
thing.
Okay,
And
so,
I'll just make sure there's no maximum attendance size.
are you all set on that?
Yes, I will be
Okay.
emailing them later.
Okay,
Madam Chair, just to round up the discussion on the solar, as I had indicated earlier, there are definitions that I currently deem are not correctly stated as definitions inside of the existing current bylaw. How would you like me to address those? Is this something that would you like?
Where are we on solar bylaws? Maybe, this probably isn't in the, everybody have access to this? I should have.
I have it right here. I couldn't find it on this one,
Oh, this is
zoning
under
bylaws,
general
it's Article
bylaws.
This-
20,
this is-
page
this-
62.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is on the zoning bylaws, right?
This is zoning bylaws, page 62.
So for example, section 20.2.1 and section 20.2.4. I'll let you read them if you would like to. As indicated, I mean, these are not definitions,
Yeah,
but
they're not
rather they are, but
definitions.
rather they are regulations. And so I think that they are incorrectly and inappropriately placed in the definition section.
Oh, it's quicker.
I think that's right,
Okay.
totally, but,
In addition, I believe there are additional set of definitions that ought to be included on the definition section. I have a list that I can share in whatever the next public meeting is, and I can present those and make sure that there's copies of that. I can maybe hand those over to Christine, and then Christine can make them available to the rest of the board, and then present that as part of the meeting.
right, you wanna put on the agenda for a month from now, our next meeting?
Well, if I am not here, what I'll do is nonetheless, or if
Oh,
we are
that's right.
moving it, or if we're moving it to the following week, because I'm not here, depending on what the pleasure is of the board, I can certainly make those definitions available. Okay? And these definitions.
Yeah, send it along.
Yep.
And we may hold it till you're back,
Okay,
but at least you have a chance to read it.
correct, and that's certainly something that I would like to make available. And these definitions, by the way, these are definitions that come from the Department of Energy Resources.
These
Okay.
definitions?
No, the ones that I'm proposing, that
okay.
they're actually proposing that they actually be included. This is not
Okay,
definitions that are coming
okay.
up ad hoc, but rather these are definitions that are actually in the model bylaw, solar bylaw that they're proposing. These are definitions that they are suggesting actually be included in there, that we have not included in our own solar bylaws,
Okay,
okay?
so we have definitions that need revising, definitions that need to be included in this discussion of the bylaw. And then I
Yeah.
think that if we're going to not do a moratorium, but we're gonna try to work with what we've got, it's this lot size that's the issue, which is a minimum of 80,000 square feet will be required for lots to have a large solar. That is not very big, ground-mounted panel facilities.
Correct.
That's a 2-acre lot, allows you to put a solar farm on it.
Correct. And
So-
not only
So,
that, but,
It's too small, I think.
yeah, that's too small.
So that is something you could fix with the one, among amendments, if you had amendments related to that bylaw, that would be easier if there's not time to do an overlay and you wanna just, again, like the gravel. Put a fix in it that would help.
Right, increase it.
I don't think there's any rule that would prevent that,
Because most lots aren't, say, 10 acres, so you could say you can only put it on a 10-acre lot, and that would
or bigger.
drastically, yeah, or bigger, and that
Yeah.
would drastically cut down.
I mean, I am though, the thing that appeals about the overlay to me is that you could put a priority in reclaiming land versus cutting down forest and taking up farmland.
Right.
So I think even if you did this, it'd be a Band-Aid, we'd still wanna be
We-
looking at it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Correct. Fixing it.
So Christine, if you could put in your notes to discuss the lot size,
Mm-hmm.
20.2.12, when we discuss solar again.
Yep.
All right, ready to talk about signs for a minute, everybody?
Sure.
Signs.
Would you like me to make copies of what you provided?
How long would it take?
About 3 minutes.
You wanna take a 3-minute break so you can have a copy of what I did?
Sure.
It's not,
Put a motion to adjourn for 3 minutes?
recess for,
For recess?
Recess.
I'm sorry, not
You
adjourn,
can't
recess.
adjourn.
have a cookie.
What
A
page
research-
is these,
research.
that on,
What?
the sign by law?
Well, here's
I'm
what.
trying to do it here.
Yeah,
Well, no,
well,
she drafted something completely new, Bill.
Oh.
so here's what I did, yeah,
okay.
but that's all right, leave what you
We
got
have a
up,
motion on
Bill.
table, by the way, right?
A motion to recess for 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay,
we have to
Second?
vote on that? I'll
Yes.
second that.
Okay,
We
all
need
in
to.
favor?
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
have a cookie and
Yeah, we should.
walk around.
Have a cookie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a copy, Alice?
I do.
Very good. Want a cookie?
No thanks.
Do two-sided if you can, Christina.
It already is.
Okay.
Bill, you said you had a knife. Do you mind?
Excuse me?
A knife?
Oh,
Thank you.
need a clicker.
Save the wildlife, I agree with you.
It's a habit.
Oh, yeah, I did it all the time.
I don't buy anything like that.
Sorry?
I don't buy anything with that on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, this doesn't have the page up and page down. I'm so used to using that.
Yeah.
So Control F,
Just find. Yeah.
find if I want to say signed by law.
Yeah.
Now, how do you
I don't think you
execute
can
that?
search in this view. If you click at the top there, it says open with Google Docs.
Oh, you do it there?
Yeah. So yeah, click on that. Then it actually opens up the document, and now from here you should be able to do your Control F and search.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's the whole thing, wow. No, it didn't work.
It didn't find all of that. Try to just do sign or do
Yes, we're
bylaws
going.
one
I
word.
meant to tell you that.
Excellent.
We were at the
We'll talk
Celtic
later.
soldier
Oh,
last night.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was nice. Yes,
Thank you. Where was it?
In the Hanover.
Oh,
It
nice.
was nasty drive to drive home, you know, but it was
Nice.
lovely. It was very heartening.
Very good.
All right, should we come back into
Oh.
One.
out of recess here?
Let's come out
Yes.
of research. Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for that?
No, it was 3 minutes. Your turn.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm not touting this as the great answer, right? So
Okay.
I just wanna tell you what I did,
Okay.
is, so I took all the bits and pieces and things that Todd Miller gave us, some of which was really helpful. And then I looked at our bylaw too, and I tried to develop I just tried to put them in logical sequence,
Right.
so that, and eliminate the redundancies and just give us, get a starting point. It's still got a lot of problems, but if you can sort of leaf through it and look at the bold heading, it progresses, purposes, applicability, what it's not applicable to, which were sort of scattered, especially the non-applicable stuff, was scattered throughout the bylaw we have. So like this wouldn't be street numbers, it wouldn't be apartment numbers, it wouldn't be any state municipal signs, I was trying to, one of the way to cut it down is to just exclude things it doesn't cover by broad categories, Christmas light, holiday light, just commercial signage, basically, right? But it's still a complicated bylaw because you have to have, you've got these categories, signs private signs advertising businesses on that private property, right? Private businesses advertising on public property. So you've got just a lot of divisions, and then you've got also the various districts, what you're going to allow where, right?
Right.
So this was an attempt to put a logical sequence together that does this. When all is said and done, and then when you get to page 8, you have restrictions available, mobile signs, restrictions available to mobile signs, movable signs, and then non-conforming signs, and then it goes into, okay, what you're gonna allow by district, written out. And then Todd Miller had done charts, which certainly can't be used the way they are because they don't have the names of our districts in them, if you look at the end.
Yeah.
And they, even if you fix them for the districts, you've got the first chart, which is yes, they're allowed, no, they're not allowed, with some exceptions. And then you've got the sizes, and we've never even talked about sizes of signs.
Right.
So we have a long way to go.
Right, right. It looks
Got it?
more organized the way you did it.
Well, I don't know whether you need the charts. I don't know that the charts are helpful or not. The charts in the existing bylaw are very confusing. You might just be better to put it in words, but there are chart people and then there are word people.
Right.
So I leave it to you, but there are some things that before Christina can make, and she helped me a lot, because I did this and then she formatted it. So, and the formatting isn't perfect either, but it's a whole lot better than it was.
Well, I
And I
think it
did.
was cut and pasted so many times, there was a lot of things.
Well, I started
Nice.
doing that.
Yeah,
And then you eliminated the redundancy, and then but honestly, I don't take it took me a lot of time,
yeah.
but I don't know that it may be actually easier to debug our existing bylaw.
Mhm.
I mean, it's gonna be a lot of work either way. But there are some basic fundamental things in going through this that I think we have not decided, and things that came to my attention. So if we could work on those, so at least Christina had some idea where we stand on some of these things.
What were
So,
some of the issues that came up while you were doing
oh,
this?
okay, so one of the issues is, just sort of, the problem with the old sign. The old sign bylaw
Yeah.
is a 2006 sign, so it's kind of out of date. And then it's too inclusive and detailed. It's holiday lights. It goes to the diameter of the balloons you can put up. It tells the building inspector what his criteria is, and when it's just too micromanagement, I think. And then it's repetitive. So it's 13 pages in really tiny print. And also too many permits are required, I think. Not everything requires a permit. You can put regulations in place, and if people don't comply with them, let a neighbor complain. But at least it doesn't take up town permitting time of somebody,
Mhm.
particularly since the zoning enforcement officer and the building department handles these, right? So you don't want to be going to them with every sandwich sign you're looking for and say, we need a permit for this, right? So it's an issue. That's one of the issues. Then it was the existing bylaws, both under-inclusive and over-inclusive. For example, all neon signs forbidden, but there's not even mention really of LED signs, which kind of mimic neon signs. I mean, it just wasn't in there. And certainly the electronic messaging signs weren't in there. I guess they came into vogue after 2006.
Right.
So you have those problems, and so anyway, there's a lot of things in it, but some things that we can take up is a general proposition with the permitting. What I did in my draft is I said, okay, we're going to require a permit for permanent signs.
Okay.
And that may still be over-inclusive or under-inclusive. If you want to put a sign on the side of your barn that advertises your business, would you really need a permit for that if we had home occupation signs or, small, that are not, where if we could specify the size and the basic content?
Right.
Maybe we don't.
Right.
But there is a question. One of the main questions is who are we going to require to get a permit? And then I also said, and this is just guessing in my draft, is we have very little on illuminated signs. What exists in our present law is you can't have any balloon signs. Oh, the GFA sign is certainly a balloon sign. And I don't have that much of a problem with balloon signs, but that's the way it is. No internally illuminated signs. And externally illuminated signs have to be shut off in residential districts. So even if it's lighting a gateway sign to all of them off, except for an hour before opening and an hour after closing. And maybe we don't need to be that restrictive. But I had said in permitting, if it's lighting, I figure, well, you're gonna have an electrician, you're gonna be running wires out there. It'd be, a big, significant investment too.
Right.
To also have lighted signs. But maybe I don't feel that way about small window signs, which are forbidden in our present bylaw. The open-close sign, the little Budweiser
Right.
sign in the bottom of the bar window. So there are some things about, that's a big issue. What are we gonna require a permit for? But we had kicked this around and we had suggested, well, maybe the clerk, if you just wanna put out your sandwich board, the clerk does not wanna be involved with this. And the
No.
building department does not wanna be involved with sandwich signs either, or anything
No.
like it. So we're gonna have to go, I think, with a format that is clear, tells people what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And then if they don't go along with it, wait for a complaint to come in and then we can,
And that's the best
Do
way to do
something
that.
about
'Cause
it.
otherwise,
because we can't create a bureaucracy, another
No.
bureaucracy, because we just don't have the resources to do it.
and there is a problem in town, because if you look, and over the years, like you said, nobody's really enforced any of these regulations.
No one
Because if you go around town, there's a lot of different things that
Mm-hmm.
not in compliance, and some were there prior to the bylaw.
And there's
So,
yeah.
How do you,
Well, you do need, I don't think I think good, clear, and reasonable bylaws.
Yes, exactly.
People
Reasonable.
are likely to follow,
If they're
Correct.
reasonable, right?
and you don't
Right.
need to have,
if you say you
to make
can't
them
have
get
an
a
open
permit
sign,
to
no one
follow it,
listens.
right?
Right.
So anyway, those are some of those issues, so that's a big issue.
how are we
Um,
gonna handle, can I throw, since the topic came up just now, how do we handle signs that are already there? Some of these signs are really expensive.
Well, the
There's a
non-conforming signs
there's a
are allowed to
grandfathering.
remain, they're grandfathered.
We're gonna keep that.
It is in there.
It is
Okay.
in there, yeah, and I've kept it in there, and I think
Okay,
you have to
good.
do that, as long as it isn't, I mean, the present bylaw has, if it's 50% obliterated, then it's not, I mean, it has these very specific rules, and the question is, do you wanna take that approach? Or do you just wanna say, just the basics, when it's no longer used, when it's no longer operable, when it's time to be replaced?
Right.
And you can't actually replace it. So the GFA, if they got bought by another bank and they wanted to put up the new bank's name on that sign, they could do that with grandfathering. So, but I don't know. I mean, balloon signs is an issue. They're very they're not that out of vogue. If you look at balloon signs today, though, the way they regulate them is they say the background, that only the letters can light up on the balloon sign. So if you think of like the Ford dealership down in Holden,
Mm-hmm.
the Ford lights up, the word Ford, but the black is navy, so all you see at night is
The sign at the top.
sign. So I don't know whether you want to have a wholesale, all balloon signs are not allowed. I don't know. And where are we going to allow LED signs, and what are we going to do? Right now, the town center district is a hybrid between a residential zone
And commercial.
and a commercial zone. And are we gonna keep that? And I don't know how much pushback we're gonna get on that. But presumably, if you're gonna allow LED lights, small lights of size in the town commercial district, you then have the question, are you gonna allow them in
Town center.
town center district? And I think those residents have a right to say, too. So, well, all the residents have a right to say anyway, but I think, so these are some things we can think about. So, unless anybody has any objection to it, I would say the permits have to be limited to the permanent signs. And maybe not all permanent signs.
Right. I think permanent signs, whatever,
signs.
over a size or something, whatever we decide,
Well, think about what that would be, yeah,
Right.
over a size or freestanding,
or even a number.
or a,
A certain number of signs. So, you don't want to have
number-
somebody to put up 100 2-foot signs, right?
there are limits of signs in the present bylaw, and maybe we wanna continue that.
Right.
Should we look
Like
at our
going down
benchmarking
95
plans
when
and
you
see how they
see
do it, Madam
South
Chair?
of the border sign.
Yeah, okay,
They were right
yeah,
on top
sure.
of each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Christina can look at what's done in benchmarking with respect to certain of these categories.
Okay.
Permitting would be one,
Right.
um,
How they manage things like LED or
Yeah, whether-
in what districts, town center versus
Mhm.
residential. I could just bring all that information to the board and they could make a decision based on what's already being done in the in our benchmarking towns.
Is that something you could put on the drive so we could read it prior to the meeting too?
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, maybe, but one thing to think about is what do you want to do with LED signs and with window signs? Well, presently, it's the window signs, they have some illuminated signs, they just had no neon. But it's no flashing, no scrolling, no window signs. And the ground lit signs are in residential zones, not allowed to be on an hour before opening or an hour after closing. Oh, it says all districts. So I don't think we really wanna do that, do we? I mean,
Can you point us to the sections in your document where these things would be?
well, Christina did it for me, a table of contents, so you could see
Okay.
internally illuminated sign, externally illuminated sign, so look at, 17.18.
718?
Externally illuminated signs, page 9.
But you don't have to go with what I say.
No, I understand, but at least has a.
so
I
signs-
appreciate you doing this.
So, externally illuminated signs is 18. So you do want this, they must be illuminated in such a way so as not to direct unnecessary glare towards neighboring or contiguous residential properties. That was straight out of Todd's language, right? Externally illuminated signs, whether mounted above or below the sign, shall illuminate only the surface of the sign. And then what do we want to do here? Externally illuminated signs, I put in red, in residential agricultural districts must be turned off. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the night sky people too, but you don't want people in the middle of town to be turning off their signs an hour after they close, do we? I mean, we already kind of have that. As you go through town, it's dark at night, except for the night.
Well, some people like that.
I know, maybe, so this is a question, how to deal with this whole, how to balance
Is this
the
something
interests.
we should rewrite this and then we're gonna bring this to a town, open it up to the
We
public?
absolutely, we're gonna develop a draft and then has a town meeting. And maybe because of the closeness of the streets, I know there will be streets lights added, right? With the town center plan? There'll be new
There's
street
some.
lights that are supposed to be low glare and,
Correct. There are
County.
streetlights going up, they're the lower ones
that
that
might-
don't shine into the houses.
Yes.
that might, be a better solution to the darkness problem than allowing commercial signs on all night, but certainly you need to think about that. Eternally illuminated signs, this is what our present bylaw says, I guess, are permitted,
Which one?
19, this is Todd Miller's too. His suggestion was internally illuminated signs, either balloon signs, right, are permitted for use by municipal and nonprofit agencies only. Now that wouldn't include the bank, which is grandfathered, right? But, and then he has these specific things which are important to limit the illumination to 0.8 foot candles, so they're not glaring signs.
Which is the,
And highlighted in yellow, 17.9.
Well, we don't have it in yellow, but it's.
Oh, you don't, sorry.
yes, but which is also under the United States Department of Transportation sign illumination.
It's required, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe worth putting in as a reference, because if you're the person putting the sign up, maybe you don't need to go to the US code and find it. I don't know. It's,
Well,
again,
I think it's here, it's clearly
That's what it
specified,
says.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, worth
I
No,
think
we're
we can
going
leave
by
it
what
here.
the law says.
yeah, well, again, this is pulled together from Todd Miller's stuff.
Right.
Right. And so then he had this big section, if you go to LED signs, which is interesting. So LED signs, the rules would be, this is page 10. All LED numerals and letterings may be of any color but only one color. LED signs cannot blink or scroll to convey a longer message. So you know how the crawler on the bottom of your TV, to get a long message in, it flips from pages, you can't do that. Which doesn't mean it couldn't have different messages. LED background can only be black, brightness levels, again, that 8-foot candles, 0.8-foot candles.
Is this something that's required here? At the end of that sentence, it goes, the installer must provide sign brightness to the land use development office and 0 prior to installation and prior to the approval of a permit.
Maybe not. I
Never
mean,
heard of that.
the question is, if you think about LED signs, it's everything from that little open sign in the window
Right.
to the giant bank sign that gives time and temperature and, you know.
I'm just saying, my question is, what office is that? The land use development office?
Yeah, that's our building department's new name.
Yeah, the land use development, because it now takes into account Board of Health, Building Department. That's what they're calling it, the land use office now.
I mean, let me ask you this here, I mean,
Oh.
I
That's
don't.
what Mallory is
Yeah.
now. She's the admin of land use.
Oh.
Yeah, so I changed that too. So that isn't different, because it's the building inspector
Yeah.
in our present bylaw too. Francois, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, when you're putting a sign like this, you are going to be requesting and requiring a permit.
Right.
And therefore, as part of the permit, it just indicates that,
Oh, no, but I didn't know they created a new department in town, like, well, they
Well,
renamed one.
Yeah, they
Okay.
renamed 3, because she's now technically with the Board of Health and,
okay,
The building department.
Concom and the
Right.
Building Department.
So are we saying this would be for like an LED open sign? You would need to get a permit and show the brightness to
We need to fix this,
'cause
because that's
that-
kind of
that
crazy.
seems
right?
excessive
Right
to me.
now, it's not allowed. No
Right.
open lit signs
Correct.
or closed signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know about anybody else, but
I-
my view is that
I think
all
that's
towns
too
allow the
Open
little
signs.
Budweiser
Right.
sign in the bottom of
Little
the bar, the open
small,
close.
certain size,
Yeah,
you know, like the
certain
Pizza Palace has, and
So we need to split LED into, and I don't know what, those signs probably have a different name. They're like neon look LED signs, or I don't know.
there could be an LED sign of a certain size, or we could even specify an open and closed LED
Yeah,
sign.
we could specify open, closed.
Open
section.
close, or I think that, I mean, even Barry, the bar has a little,
It's yeah, I think it's hard to deny an open and closed sign. To,
Well, or-
Unless-
if
unless-
you're encouraging businesses, it's hard.
Unless
to-
we tell them to go to the old flip sign on the door, but.
right, open, and to me, the same thing goes for a restaurant sign
Mhm.
that gets, I mean, they get, I'm sure it's a deal
Mhm.
if you are willing to put a small beer sign, but there may be people in town that take real offense with that, I really don't know. So we have to be willing to get some pushback from people too, and, you
Right,
know.
we're gonna get input.
Feedback,
hopefully.
yeah.
But now, Todd Miller thought that service station LED signs were different than other LED signs. Because, I'm not sure why, but these were his provisions that it makes some sense to me. Because they're ground mounted, they're big signs, they can only advertise fuel. So that's the last section of the LED. But I think that John's right, we need another section for small LED window signs and stuff.
Yeah, I like that, section C.
Yeah. So, and then
Oh,
electron messaging center signs.
Wait a
that-
minute, I found a mistake here, it goes,
What?
top of that page, it goes B, C, D, E, and then it goes back to B.
Yes.
Should that be F?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, F,
So the next one would be G.
F. Yeah, there's some other,
Whatever.
it's much better than it was.
Oh, yes.
Christina fixed it up. Anyway, and then electronic messaging signs, which is what sort of kicked this off, was, when the zoning board of appeals said we can't allow it because the sign bylaw doesn't allow it, in fact, it disallows it, right? So, so the electronic messaging signs, again, Todd Miller's thing was permissible only for municipal and nonprofit entities use only, and the following restrictions would apply. So you can read this, I'm just trying to tell you sort of where I stand on it, but I do think the issues of illuminated signs is huge. When are we gonna require them to close, are we not, are we gonna allow small LEDs, are we gonna allow, so think those through, and Christina maybe can get us some comparisons, right?
Mhm.
And do they, one of the things you should look at in their signs, if you're gonna look at is, do they have times when they must be turned off, is that common?
Okay.
Off and on, and is it common in a commercial district?
Most places allow them to leave their signs on.
Yeah, I think
would
they do
think.
too. But I understand why in a neighborhood, you know, this is Todd Miller's thing was, we ought to make 68 more, we ought to have more commercial spaces in 68 with these
Mhm.
nodes.
Right.
but I don't think you can, and then I said, well, can you sort of do advanced planning for that? And he gave me us provision if you look. But I don't know how you, when I really thought about, how can you plan for something that doesn't exist yet?
I
right?
agree. That's why I think we should make
So-
that a higher priority in our list, the zoning districts. But I realize we're taking the class first and stuff that has to get
I
done.
think it would
but-
make sense to take the class and then we can really put some good thought
so
into it.
I definitely think that we should prioritize
can-
that.
And you can amend the sign by law at the same time to
Correct.
pass that.
Correct.
Right, that, right.
There's a lot of these things we're talking about, the solar farm, the marijuana. If we had a zoning district, it would be a lot easier to fine tune them.
An overlay, yeah.
Right, with an overlay district.
I thought also an easy thing to do would be just to exclude municipal signs of all sorts. Traffic, historic signs, playing fields, just,
I think that makes
this
a
is
lot
really
of sense.
commercial signage.
Right, exactly. If it's something for the town, then
And they do have, with temporary signs, I put this in too, think most towns do this. They regulate like realtor signs and construction signs. So, so under temporary signs on private property, which is 1710,
Yeah.
it includes realtor signs. Our present bylaw allows these, has a provision, it's like placement of private signs remote from the property, because the general rule is your sign should relate to the business that's on the property, or the business, like improvement that's going on in that property. If your roofer is putting a roof on and wants to put a sign up, that's. But there, well, what about the realtor's open house sign? What about remote signs, this way to the fair? And I don't know, do we really need to do that?
Personally, like the real estate ones, if they're doing an open house on ABC Street,
Yeah,
and it's hard to get to, and they put signs up along the way, sometimes they do get left behind, and
Yeah.
I agree with Francois with that.
so we should put a provision in that states that
How
responsible
are you
for
gonna
placing
enforce
them.
that, though?
you can't.
The date
You-
on
no-
the back. That
What's
was
it?
discussed by Todd Miller. If the date's put on the back every time one of those goes down,
Who's gonna enforce that?
it
That-
would have to be a
that's-
complaint.
Right, that's the problem. How do you enforce that the signs get taken down, and what if they don't? What do
Usually when
And there's plenty of examples. I mean, just even in the corner of
They're all over the place.
of Healdville Road and Brigham Street right now, there's a realtor sign that's been sitting around and laying on the street for God knows how long.
So maybe
And
you
the
just,
realtor has not done anything. If I pick it up, I might be picking up a piece of personal property
Yeah, that
or
is-
property, then I become potentially liable of.
maybe
Right.
we should.
Maybe we could put something in there saying it can be removed after a certain by the town. We could say the town, or
Yes.
because I don't know how you enforce it. You can't. There's no penalty. You
But
can't.
you could require them to put a date,
Mm-hmm.
and, I mean, you require it whether they comply or not, a date
Right.
and a name and a contact number.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And if it doesn't have it, it can
Then
be
it's-
removed.
And then it can be removed. That's
Right.
fair. Yep.
There you go, because now it's not private property. It's not there legally.
Yep. If they don't put the date and the contact information, the sign can be removed by anyone.
It's just, I think it's gonna be very tough, because most people aren't gonna read our sign by law before they put a real estate
Well-
sign out.
Right.
You know,
Sign by laws are tough. I was surprised at how long it took me to,
it's a
To
lot of
go over it,
information.
So I think with this here, the question is if we're putting these things here, and if we do not have adherence, what teeth
Mm-hmm.
can we put in here
No,
so
you're
that
right.
people can understand that this is done for the purposes of keeping our sign by law active and
How's
valid?
this sound, if we put instead of having a big section here about real estate and contractor signs,
And it's not
What if-
just that,
what
it's
if we
it
just
is
have a
temporary
section that
signs in
says-
general.
signs that have been left and not attended to, or however we can word that, and their appearance is faded and laying on the ground or something like that, so you know it's just been there a long time. Could we just have a statement for that it can be removed by the town or property owners?
So the question I think is here, who becomes in there for the garbage collector?
Well, it
And
usually
what
ends
is it-
up being the landowners or the neighbors.
Well, it's either that or, so the question is this here, is it gonna be a zoning enforcement officer who basically comes back and says, hey, we got somebody who's not doing what they're supposed to do, and therefore they can potentially be fined, right? Give them sort of a break the first time, the second time around. I can tell you, for example, there's cities and towns in other places where these things are very, very critical because they have sidewalks and, you know, the realtors put these little sandwich boards, and if they leave them out, I do know of communities where the zoning enforcements, they go like, Saturdays is a very good day, or Sundays is a very good day. They go out and they review them, and if these things are still sticking out there, they'll grab them and they'll be putting fines against whatever that company is. And it's not, you know, it's not something to penalize to gain money. It's more than anything just to enforce so that they understand this is the way it's supposed to be happening, and do this here probably correctly. And by so doing, you're basically compensating the zoning enforcement officer for their effort. So it's
Oh,
not,
yeah,
we
yeah.
shouldn't be subsidizing it as citizens,
Right.
right, for somebody who's doing the wrong thing, but rather we should be ensuring that A, it is adhered to, and if it's not, then the penalty needs to be paid by the person or persons who are not doing what they're supposed to. And that's kind of my 5 cents on this
So
here.
if you look at like 1713,
Mhm.
which deals with this exact issue, you have movable signs on public property, right?
Page 8.
So you could add an E, so it basically says movable signs such as sandwich boards for use by adjacent entities, owners, tenants, etc., are allowed on public property without a permit subject to the following restrictions, right? Signs may be displayed only during hours and days of business. Signs may be placed on a public sidewalk, curb, or pavement adjacent to the property, but may not obstruct pedestrian access movement, vehicular traffic, as determined in consultation with the chief of police. Signs may not be illuminated or contain moving parts, or have balloons, streamers, pennants, and so forth. This is again out of Todd Miller's. Attaching movable signs to structures. Utility poles, that's such a big one, right?
Yep.
Or other objects like park benches, whatever, means, by any means is not allowed, it's prohibited. And then 1 sign per lot, per business, or per business if it's a multi-tenant lot. So you could put E, which would be signs not complying with this, which means all they have to do is be left out when they're not open, can be subject to a fine or removed.
In my opinion, it can be subject. I think it does not have to be strictly a fine, but can be subject to a fine.
Yeah, I like that.
And this is something that the zoning enforcement officer has the right to do.
And we should have a name.
But it's
On
hard
this-
for like a real estate sign because they're not open. You can't say you can only have the real estate sign out when they're open.
No, but we have very clearly indicated that the real
Fine.
estate sign can only be and that's taken
Right.
care
If
of.
you're doing an open
These are
house,
movable signs on public property.
Yeah.
Right.
So generally,
I mean, that's
Well, the
that's
realtor-
on page 6.
Yeah, that's all I was saying. Was you were saying something about
Yeah,
the
the
business being
realtors-
open? It's got to just be more
Well, the other
inclusive.
thing with realtors too, if they put a sign along the way, they show people how to get there, open house this way.
yeah, see that I would.
It's usually, in our area here, the rural neighborhoods, it's not in front of the lot, it's a mile or 2 up the road, arrow this way.
But they're supposed to, if it's an open houses are typically 1 day.
Right.
Yeah.
Upon the completion of an open house, they need to go out and they need to just basically remove it.
Right.
And if they don't do that, I think that it's very reasonable for the zoning enforcement officer, if they see things like that, pick them up, call them up and say, your signs are here, and by the way, you're not allowed to put another sign, or this is your fine.
Out of curiosity, should we have the CEO in on one of these meetings for the sign
I think
bylaw?
that makes a lot of good
Because I don't
sense.
believe at the moment that he does drive around the town.
No,
Well,
I'm-
That's
I
not
was
part of
gonna-
his current duties.
I
I was
agree.
just gonna make a comment to the fact, I don't know if our current building inspector would have the time to do any of that.
And I don't think he may or he may not, and he may come
Right.
up with a different set of suggestions,
Yeah,
because
but if
Gardner
it-
being a larger town, larger city, may have other ways by which they're handling this
Right,
here.
right, that's a good point.
So I think it might be a good idea for us to query, our building inspector, or the zoning enforcement officer, whoever that is, if it
Okay.
happens to be the building inspector or somebody else.
Okay, I could write up a list of questions for
Yeah.
Roland and then just have him reply to them and I'll present that to the board. That way he doesn't have to come in.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, think of it this way, if I am a citizen, or anybody who's here is a citizen, and is complaining about a given sign,
Right,
where does that complaint go in?
exactly.
That complaint probably goes, I wouldn't be surprised, it probably goes into the town clerk then distributes it to the zoning enforcement officer.
Mhm.
And it's up to the zoning enforcement officer at that point in time to cite the offending party
Right,
for that, for the offense. Or make a
Right.
decision, is a first warning, second warning, and the third time, this is the fine.
Yeah, I
right.
think a complaint procedure.
that needs to
and
be
a
included.
fine and a,
Correct.
and I think there's also, probably be a line that if there's any private sign on public property which is impeding any access, that
So the
the
only
police
question,
cruiser-
the only question I
cruiser can
have
pick it up.
is how many times have we seen lost and stolen cat signs or lost and stolen dog signs?
stapled to the tree.
Staple to,
Or
staple
yard
to.
sale.
Yard sales is a very good example. We have a town-wide yard sale, you know, on an annual basis. Although I've never seen a problem with those because people
Most
typically
of the
have their
folks
map.
who do it, they pick them all up.
Yeah, and they have a map and things of that nature. I'm thinking more of a poor owner has lost their dog, and problem is those lost dog signs are still there a year after.
I think though, well, I don't know, I mean,
I mean, we need to
they're
keep-
forbidden in our present bylaw too, so
Well,
it isn't.
yeah, I know that.
I just don't wanna get so
But-
restrictive here.
Yeah,
I really don't. I'd like to, you know,
yeah. I mean, I think we need to be considerate of
Yeah.
of those individuals who have lost a pet or something like that. But on the other hand, if you're running a business, run your business cleanly and run your business correctly, and don't just, you know, have the town be the dumping ground of your signs.
no, I agree with that.
Well, if we make the restrictions, you know, business signs, I don't know, I do think a property owner in a neighborhood, I've taken down the lost cat signs when it's 2 years,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah.
And I think citizens have that right. I don't know that we can clean up too much of it. I don't wanna create a huge, backlash though from residents who are unhappy about lighted signs, and we
Agreed.
need to get it right.
Yep, it's a hard one because
So-
you're never going to you're never going to find the person who likes to have a light, and other people who say, "Well, I love the lights."
Well, if you get a chance, read my bylaw.
I will.
You can.
Do you have this on, computer?
I can send it out now that it's been discussed.
And
Okay.
you can
Oh, good.
send comments to Christina, don't send them to me.
Sure.
With
You
this
can put 'em
Chromebooks, can I
together.
ask you a question? If I wanna highlight something, like on here, and
Yes.
put color or whatever onto it,
Your best bet is to well, as long as it's a doc file and not a PDF,
okay,
your best bet is to download it to your
Chromebook.
Chromebook and then highlight it, because
Then I
otherwise
can do it,
everything you
okay.
do up there, everybody gets to see.
Oh, okay,
This is a shared drive, we are sharing these files.
okay.
So, this is
But
not,
I can email it to, like I can put it up there in PDF, but if you email me and say, hey, can I have a doc file? I will email that to you directly, you download it to your computer at home, or
Okay.
even this one, and you can download it to your own Chromebook,
Yeah.
and then you can highlight it all you want.
Okay,
so will you put this up for
That's
them?
good.
I will.
Anybody
Yeah.
have a problem
Right
with
here,
that?
with the downloaded
But I'm not
document,
wedded
you
to
can
it.
highlight
If you
color.
think
Yeah, Amazon.
there's a better way
Yeah.
to do it, we can even debug the one we've got, which isn't the worst sign in the world, personally. All right, back to our agenda for just a couple of quick items. Christina, you had something, approve the TA grant, town administrator.
That's going to be under matters not reasonably anticipated. We do have the correspondence, the DHCD has updated the CHI.
Oh, yes.
SHI letter, you'll find that in,
yeah, I read that.
Yeah, there's no change, and they said, I don't know whether you sent it to me or Ryan sent it to me, but what you're just supposed to do is take that, attachment to the letter and write no changes and just send it back.
Right.
There are
right,
directions in that, and
Right.
I asked Ryan, does he want me to do that? As the chair of the planning board? Or
it
does
just
he
says
wanna do
to
it?
local official, and that was where I was a little concerned, but the planning board technically is now the affordable housing, and SHI
Okay.
deals with affordable housing. So if we wanted to, I can write on this no changes as long as I get a vote to that effect, that I can send this back out.
Okay, so if you look at the attachment, it lists what we knew,
Right.
which is Hubbardston House on Old Princeton Road, has 36 SHI units. And then their group homes, we don't count this as a town, this comes in from another source, from the Department of Mental Health or something. That there's 13 SHI units that are group homes.
Mhm.
So, that's 49 total units, which is 3.01% of the housing units in town,
Mhm.
based on the 2010 census. So it's actually pretty generous, because we've had more houses and no SHI units since then. But we can say this is correct, I'm with a pretty high confidence interval.
I agree with that.
Yes.
Okay. So,
I
also,
make that motion.
okay. So the motion would be to send back, to approve the Department of Housing and Community Development's count of SHI units.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'll stop in tomorrow. Cause I'm gonna sign,
You don't have to, I can just send this out, I have a vote.
okay. You got the vote, that's good enough for you, it's good enough for me.
Okay, after that, it's town notices and then matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. This was brought to me today by the town administrator. There is a new grant, having to do with municipal vulnerability preparedness, and this is the information on it. This was sent from MRPC and John Hume, who we've met as he came in for the chapter. This is a new grant that's coming in. Define climate-related hazards, identify existing and future climate vulnerabilities and strengths, identify opportunities to take action to reduce risk and build resilience, and implement priority actions identified through the planning process. These are the things that this grant would help the town do. But, however, turns out this is a brand new grant, and the deadline is the beginning of January.
Are these, I'm sorry, a quick clarification, are these all climate-related issues? Or I'm asking because the third bullet item where it says identify opportunity to take action to reduce risk and build resilience, is that specific to a particular issue that has to do with climate?
I believe
or?
it's climate because it's put up by the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the EEA.
Okay.
So this is all basically a grant to try and build preparedness. I was told that the deadline for this application is actually January 15th. This sort of happens sometimes. They're trying a new program out, see who's interested, see what kind of responses they get. The problem is they need a letter from the planning board in order to make this start to move, which is why it's right now as a matter not reasonably anticipated by chair, because obviously. So John Hume at MRPC drafted a letter for us.
Why don't you read it to us?
Okay.
Do you mind?
I do not.
Okay. Listen
This
up,
is
everyone.
from the town of Hubbardston. Dear Mrs. Theoharides, I'm sorry, I think I have that name correct. The town of Hubbardston Planning Board is pleased to offer support for Hubbardston's application for the Commonwealth's Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. The MVP program provides support for municipalities in Massachusetts to begin the process of planning for climate change resiliency and implementing priority projects. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs awards communities with funding to complete vulnerability assessments and develop action-oriented resiliency plans. About 43% of the Commonwealth are participating in the MVP program. Communities who complete the MVP program become certified as MVP community and are eligible for MVP Action Grant funding. Eligible Action Grant funding activities include restoring wetlands and floodplains to reduce flooding, green infrastructure and manage stormwater, wastewater and drinking water infrastructure, and planting trees to reduce the heat island effect. It should be noted that the town of Hubbardston is currently working to complete a master plan for the community, and the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission was just awarded an FY20 planning assistance grant to fund master plan chapters for the town of Hubbardston. The master plan chapters are statements of goals and objectives, transportation, services and facilities, open space and recreation, and housing. Moreover, the town has an existing hazard mitigation plan. By obtaining an MVP grant, it will further support Hubbardston's efforts pertaining to readiness related to climate adaptation. Thank you for your consideration. Alice Livedall, Chair, Hubbardston Planning Board.
I think we should send it, don't you think?
I make a motion, we go forward with that and send it.
I will second that.
I think it might be very helpful for something, you know, if they look at
I
it and they say,
agree. There's
is the
plenty
roof?
of items.
If you
Yeah.
look up here of all the listed areas,
Yeah.
we have a lot of those. We have those issues.
Yeah, all right,
And so, if anybody's listening here, the eligible action grant funding activities include restoring wetlands and floodplains to reduce flooding, green infrastructure to manage stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water infrastructure, and planting trees to reduce the heat island effect, like you said
Yeah.
before.
might help us even with the gravel pits. Think about it.
It might help us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, all right, any further discussion, should we vote?
I think
All
that
in
makes
favor of
sense.
our sending the letter?
Aye.
Okay, great, done.
Alright, one other quick item that just came up today, because the warrant got sent out early. I didn't know if you would be willing to please sign the turnover. You don't have to, but, what this is for your Chromebooks, and then also for the cases and mice for your Chromebooks, and for the posting of the Demalia special permit application, paying that check. And then the fourth item on there is I wanted a laptop stand for my desk so I could stand up. I found one that was very reasonably priced at $40. However, I wasn't available on any of the town spending at that price. The closest I could find was $100, and I'm like, no. So I ordered it off of Amazon, and I submitted the necessary paperwork to be reimbursed, and that's what the fourth item is.
Okay, good, thank you.
It's a nifty one. You should stop by and see it. Probably your back would appreciate getting
Yeah,
the
my
same
back
thing.
really does appreciate that. I don't like sitting, so.
I have one of those at work myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Standing desk.
Some of them go as much as like $400.
Yeah,
So
that's what mine
when I
was.
found that one for $40, I really liked it. I have it at home, the same one at home, which is how I knew about it.
And it works well.
It works very well. You can actually tilt it this way and then up, and it's great.
That's wonderful.
Only good for laptops, but you know,
Thank you.
that's what I have.
Okay.
We don't need a vote if we're all signing it, right?
That's right.
Okay, so KP Law, you wanna just, I know we've read it,
I read that.
Mhm.
but you
Did you
can
read
give
it?
the
I did read that
highlights
as well.
to it,
Okay. One
and we'll
second.
decide
Basically, it says we can't do it.
whether we.
Okay.
Basis
The
of
response to
agreement.
KP Law is in your, under correspondence. And it is, sorry.
Just for the benefit of the public, I
Yep.
think.
I can give the highlights. It is a, multiple page document.
Yeah, the summary's fine.
So, the question presented was whether or not the associate planning board member appointed could sit in instances other than when the planning board is acting on a special permit granting authority. We asked whether they could sit in instances of absence. We got this idea from another town, Holliston supposedly allows theirs to do it. However, the answer is that, from KP Law, is that their understanding of law is that the associate member can only sit in cases of special permit. There is no law stating that they can sit in any, or vote in any other instance, even if we do have absences or exclusions from the board. The other second question posed was whether there was any legal objection to making the associate member a resident of the town, and there is not a legal objection that they could find making if we decided to change that bylaw to make sure that the associate member was always a resident of the town.
May I speak to that for a
Yes.
second?
Sure.
This became an item and an issue, I think, that was presented last year during the town meeting. Lamentably, that particular portion was included with other changes that
Yes.
The town clearly voted against by a large majority. I think the component that has to do, and I want to state it because I personally was affected by the amendment. However, the component that had to do very specifically with the mandate that a resident be the town resident be the ones who are eligible for to become an associate member, I think that makes logical sense. We have the community, at stake, we have individuals who will be potentially working on matters that relate to the community, and so as a matter of logic, the way I look at that piece makes sense, and I would like to suggest that, and we can again add that as part of the next meeting, put some wording just around that particular section of the law, the bylaw, in order to limit or to impose the residence requirement and restriction of the associate member that they be a member of this community of Hubbardston,
There,
a resident of community of Hubbardston.
with regards to the general bylaw, that's actually two lists of appointed members. One of them is non-residents and one of them is residents. It would be just as simple as moving it from one list to the second.
Correct, and so therefore it should be fairly easy.
Yes.
It's just a very simple change, but I think
Yeah.
we need to just make sure that we also include that as part of the items that we are recommending
For warrant,
for the
yes.
warrant.
Yeah, draft up the language for it for us.
Just
Yeah.
a note,
Yes.
I'm on the zoning board of appeals, and one of our members lived in town when he got elected, and he moved twice to two different towns. But we couldn't find anybody to be on the board, and it was found out that he could stay on the board because we didn't have enough members. Because it didn't say you had to be a town resident.
Sure.
So that did help us as a board. So I just
understand.
wanted to throw that
I
out
think there's a
there.
lot more people willing to serve on planning boards and boards of health, though.
No, this is, excuse me,
Burning
zoning
up
board of
the
appeals.
ZBA.
Oh, ZBA.
Yeah,
Maybe
So-
that too,
But I just wanted to throw that out there, and I agree with you, Francois.
I mean, I just
think-
Yeah,
I happen to
let's
think
try
that
it.
we're working on matters that are very specific to our town, and I
Right.
think that having a perspective
that's
of
important.
our town is important.
Agreed.
we don't need to vote on it, cause she's gonna draft up the amendment, right?
Yes.
Right.
And then we'll see how it actually looks before we
And that
take
will
a
have to
vote.
go through public hearing anyway,
Yes.
Right,
as part of
A
whatever
bylaw.
package that we're presenting
Yeah.
as part
That-
of the public hearing.
that one should go with the gravel permit also as a general bylaw,
Yes,
Yeah.
so if you think of bundling them.
Oh, we're not, I can't bundle them, they have to be voted on separately.
correct.
Or we can have multiple warrant, we'll have,
But
half
a
dozen.
hearing.
Yeah, we can bundle the hearings.
hearing,
There's a
that's what I
hearing.
was thinking
That's
of.
correct.
Yes.
Okay, so that's it, we don't have anybody here for public comments, our next meeting is January 15th, hopefully, but we're all meeting, lest you think you were getting away with anything, on the 6th. We have to go to our,
Where is that?
Selectmen's meeting.
the selectmen's.
Now, it's very important that if anyone cannot make the community outreach hearing, you let me know, because according to our bylaw, that does have to be a joint meeting between the planning board and the board of selectmen, so if we do not have a quorum present at that meeting, we're violating our own,
Right.
and we might have to tell Mr. Schmidt, we have to,
Do we have a location set for
it'll
that?
be here,
In this?
yes.
And
But
what
it will
time?
be it will be at the Board of Selectmen's posted meeting. As far as we know, Mr. Schmidt hasn't actually gotten it posted to the Gardner News yet. I'm waiting before I post the community outreach hearing on the website,
Is it 2 weeks?
it has to be 2 weeks in advance.
What's the date for that?
The 6th? You mean, I'm sorry, what's the date for that?
Backing up.
It has to be Monday.
This coming Monday?
The 30th.
Yes, it will have to be posted the first time, on the 23rd.
Okay.
23rd.
And we
He
hope
knows
he
that,
does so.
right?
Yes.
Well, he was
I-
told.
I did tell
Yeah.
him it had to be 2 weeks in advance.
Oh, you might give him another reminder, I don't know.
Well, it's up to him if.
It's up to him.
If it doesn't,
Yeah, if he
If
can't
he
do it.
doesn't do it, he doesn't do it.
Do we have a
Right.
time on the 6th?
I'm sorry?
The time on the 6th?
I believe it begins at 6 or 6:30. I
Yeah,
apologize.
but
I can look that up real
I believe it's
quick.
open to the
Okay.
public at 6, the meeting starts at 6:30.
I'm checking right now.
Are they
Okay.
putting it right into their regular meeting though, or?
They are.
No.
It is they're actually having a meeting no matter what, and
Okay,
whether or not Mr. Schmidt decides to
Okay.
show up for
Yeah,
community
but-
outreach.
I'm just looking at my calendar, so it's a standard Monday meeting,
It
first Monday
is
of the
at
month.
6:30.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Board of Selectmen
all
meeting.
right. So, I kept you guys for 3 hours last time, so let's adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
I will
Is there a
second.
second?
I will
All in
second.
favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Hey, Merry Christmas.
I'm sorry, who seconded, Joan?
I second.
Thank you, I didn't catch that.